Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, last week we had a proper confirmation of an upcoming mid-season patch for Season 6 of Diablo 4. Of course, there were expectations that this would exist, given a relatively consistent track record of mid-season patches for previous seasons, but of course the main exception to that was Season 5, which was just previous to this. With this confirmation, we all know that this patch should be coming up relatively soon, and based on previous information and prior examples of how the developers want mid-season patches to work, we have some general expectations. But of course, as someone who plays this game, I also have things that I want to change, regardless of what I do or do not expect. So today I just wanted to sit down and talk about the patch, what we know, what we don't, what we want, or at least what I want personally. And for what we know, there will be a developer stream ahead of this patch, and we will get the patch notes ahead of time as well. The blog outlining the stream itself has already been made and shown to higher-ups, which we know thanks to this tweet from Rod Ferguson, and we know that the stream is directly related to the patch thanks to this tweet from Adam Fletcher. We know that a topic will come up on the stream, and it will be balance, which is a really big topic right now. But what we don't know is exactly how this balance will come into play for the mid-season, or how it will be talked about within this actual stream, as it's very important to note the wording used here, saying that there will be discussions about balance, not saying that balance will be happening in the patch or that it won't, just that we will be talking about it. In previous seasons, my expectation would be big, sweeping nerfs to spiritborn, not necessarily nerfs as in lowering numbers, but nerfs in the sense that the class has a lot of bugs right now that are causing the damage to scale exponentially higher than it should. Fixing these bugs would mean that the numbers would go down, which is nerfs in effect, even if they are bug fixes at the actual back end. So it's not a nerf in the sense that the devs want spiritborn to be weaker, so much as a bug fix that would result in massive decreases in power. That said, this is where it has become very divisive in the community of the player base, which is also shown quite well through this older tweet from Rod Ferguson, this time a poll that he specifically states is non-binding, asking for players' opinions on whether spiritborn should be fixed mid-season, or if it should just wait until the next season. There are tons of passionate people on either side of this, but the main arguments boil down to just a few key points. Spiritborn is currently so strong that it makes all of the other classes feel meaningless, especially in open world content or in groups. If you have a spiritborn anywhere close to you, you feel like you just might as well not exist because you're not really contributing much in comparison. Past that, spiritborn is so strong that it itself has become boring as a class. Completing pit tier 150 is a cool accomplishment, even if it is fueled by bugs, but when the bugs are piling so high that people are now competing with each other to basically speed run the maximum pit tier in the game, it makes just the sheer concept of difficulty feel pointless. It makes the class feel pointless because there's only one build that is relevant to that. And then there is also the main point on the other end of things too, which is of course that nerfs aren't fun for the people that they affect. Even if it is nerfing as a result of a bug fix, you are still lowering the power of existing players and builds and people that put time into these things. Not only that, but based on all the data that I've seen, spiritborn is, unsurprisingly, the most popular class this season. It was like that day one. Of course, this is a new expansion and this is the new class that has been added, but it has only become even more popular because people have swapped to play spiritborn, as it was the thing that was significantly more powerful than every other class in the game too. So at this point in the season, you have pretty undoubtedly the majority of the currently active player base on spiritborn. And whether they understand enough about the class to know what the bugs are or not behind this, if your build is completing a tier 110 pit or above that, you're likely abusing at least one bugged part of your class. And the fun part is that this also applies to every other class too, not just spiritborn. Every other class's best builds currently are also fueled by some level of bug too. It's just that spiritborn has the largest number of these due to being a fully new class. The main issue with this as well is that all of the best builds use a large number of these bugs put together, and a lot of players don't really care how their build works on the inside. They just look online, find a powerful build, and then follow it to the letter. These people are the ones that would be hit the absolute hardest by a sudden quote-unquote nerf patch for spiritborn, because they won't even know why they're weaker. They don't know what's making them so strong, so they won't understand what's been fixed. They will just suddenly go from being incredibly strong and powerful to immediately not that in an instant. Every bit of time or effort they spent putting their build together, their character, hours upon hours, instantly feeling like a pointless use of their time. The thing is, now that we've talked about both sides, it's time to sort of talk about what I think is the right move and my expectations for what will happen. First up, before people say buff all the other classes, that's not going to happen. The devs have already said that at the very least this won't be a thing that happens mid-season. They won't make everything as strong as spiritborn currently is. That's just not going to happen, because this would just not only cause just a whole other host of issues to prop up, but also it would sort of diminish the value of a lot of what they've done to rework progression in the game. That's a discussion discussion worth having for next season. Perhaps we could talk about what we think is correct for the future, but it's definitely not something for a mid-season patch. Personally, I think Spiritborn's bugs need to be fixed for the health of Season 7. If Spiritborn stays as it currently is, the only changes that we'll get for the next season will be getting rid of all the bugs that are currently causing problems. Then we'll be running on essentially the first intended iteration of the class. The game on base launch Diablo 4 last year, compared to how the same classes felt even a couple of seasons later, not even right now, is a staggering difference. It needs time to grow on its own, and the class needs space to do that. Currently, Spiritborn builds are incredibly restricted by the existence of these bugs. Either you accept that you need to use them to be competitive and to use a strong build, and then suddenly every single build that people are all using the exact same things because there's just no stronger option. Even if your build revolves around a different skill, you'll be using the same weapon, the same uniques, the same legendary aspects that bug and work together. Or the alternative is you refuse to use these bugs or lean into them, and you avoid things that might be synergies that could even have been natural to your type of build, which makes that build weaker than it should be too. It makes all of the strong builds basically be the same thing, and all of the more creative builds just instantly substantially weaker than they should be too. If we fix the bugs, then these builds can be reformed to work how they should make sense in a more intentional manner. Then once the developers can see how these builds are performing in that way, we can then have a further round of even more meaningful changes to the class before Season 7 to really balance it out and make it so there's a large amount of parity within the class. So that's sort of my take on all of that part of it. I think especially in the middle of the season, it's not the worst thing to have changes to the classes, even if it makes it weaker, as long as it makes the class feel better for the following season. The majority of the people who play the game play it at the start of each season. By the mid-season point, that will diminish significantly, so you're not going to be affecting as many people, so I'd rather the class be better for the next season. As for the other classes, I do think that it would be fun to boost everything up a bit, don't get me wrong, and just have it break a bit for the rest of the season. I think a season where everyone is just stupidly overpowered is a fun sort of idea. Maybe it's not for everyone, and it definitely shouldn't be a thing long term, but a single season can be a good way to mess with things like that. And there is argument to be made that a mid-season patch could be something like that. Like, what if you just made it so after the mid-season patch, all drop rates in the game are essentially doubled. Every character can gain power twice as fast. You could argue that that would make people upset they put time in the first half of the season, but also that's how you bring players back to keep playing, because a lot of people stopped playing when they decided they'd reached the limit of what they were willing to farm for their build. Make that easier to farm, you might get some players back. That said, the other main thing that I hope will return with this mid-season patch is new equipment. One of the first things that they introduced with mid-season patches back in the day was the idea of adding in new legendaries and uniques for each class in the middle of a season. Originally formatted around the seasonal power-ups that we got the first few seasons, but those haven't really been a thing for the last 3 seasons regardless of why, so my hope is more so just that we get more uniques and legendaries in general with the mid-season patch. Items as a whole are getting a lot better from season to season. I'm a fan of the balance between uniques and legendaries in its current state, so adding more variety, and especially for uniques, ones that enable full-on new build playstyles, is an especially fun thing to do, and in mid-season, in my opinion. Aside from that, materials could still stand to be buffed in general. Higher drop rates of iron chunks and rawhide would be nice, though I do accept that at this point that is more of a people that play too much problem rather than an average player thing like it was even before the previous changes. I would also love changes to the way that effect rolls work on greater affix items as well. We've talked about that a ton on the channel, as it feels just really anticlimactic to get a multi-greater affix item with a low effect roll on it that just makes it feel completely unusable. We know that there are conduit shrine fixes in the pipeline, and hopefully these will hit in time for this patch so that we can have that shrine be useful again, and hopefully we'll have more performance fixes too. The other big thing though that I'd like to see change is just a big jump in reward quality from the Dark Citadel, as well as a second balancing pass through the activity. Given it is one of the main selling points they used for the expansion, this new group-focused multiplayer activity, I've found Dark Citadel to be a bit disappointing, especially after the first week. A couple of the fights are sort of grossly overtuned, at least on Torment 4, seemingly based on poison damage problems, though poison has always had some issues in the game. And even if that wasn't a problem, the rewards for doing all 3 wings of the Dark Citadel, even just once per week for the weekly bonus, is just not really worth the time investment all that much. It is a fun activity the first time that you do it, and there's nothing wrong with fun activities, but if you want it to stay relevant in the endgame week after week, you need to give this activity rewards equivalent to the expected time spent. Let's say 3 wings of Dark Citadel takes you an hour. Maybe it's 40 minutes if you really speedrun it. That's 4 to 6 infernal hordes that you could have done in that time, a dozen nightmare dungeons, a dozen potential pit runs, a full hell tide of farming. You get the idea. It's comparatively a lot of time to devote to a single activity. The reward box that you get at the end of the Dark Citadel is nice. It feels good at first when you first open open it and you get some stuff on the floor, but then the moment that you start to compare how long you spend doing the activity to get that box and the amount of rewards that you could get in the same duration in other places in the game, it's just not really in a great place right now, and I think it needs some adjusting. There's also, of course, tons of bugs that need fixing, things like that, but these are the main topics that I really wanted to cover personally. I want to see spiritborn fixed, I want to see some new legendaries and uniques, ideally ones capable of creating whole new playstyles, I want to see changes to the way that drops work for greater affix items, and I want to see fixes and massive reward increases to the Dark Citadel. That is a relatively hefty list. Sure, I'd be surprised if we get even half of that, but these are all things that I would love to see changed, and I think have at least somewhat of a chance of being mid-season changes rather than having to wait for Season 7. I hope you all enjoyed this then, and let me know your own thoughts on any of this stuff down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.